Well, thanks very much indeed. Welcome to the channel. My name is Jim Ferguson, and I'm delighted to welcome Michael Leahy from Ireland as my guest today. Michael, it's great to see you again. How are you doing, mate?
I'm very well, Jim. Very well. Remember our fun times. We had a good fun weekend when you stayed with me there back in Ireland, and
Yeah.
we sank a few pints apart from anything else. So we had some very interesting conversations.
I've never tasted such good Guinness as the real stuff over there in
Yeah,
the
brilliant.
Emerald Isles, Michael. But it's the first time you've actually been on the channel with me, and I've been looking forward to this.
It's all about it.
And what I would like to do, Michael, is for the sake of our audience and our listeners, I would like you to just say a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you're located, just briefly, and then we'll get into the real good stuff. So on you go, Michael, please.
Okay, well, I'm an architect and planner. I've been in business all my life. Recently, only in the past 3 or 4 years, I've become politically active, seeing the way the country is going at a variety of different levels. The advance of wokeness, the attacks against free speech, the attacks against democratic values, the attacks against our constitution being orchestrated by the state. I have been well aware for a long time of the whole globalist agenda of undermining the nation state and undermining the civil and religious liberties of all of us. So that encouraged me to get actively involved in politics, and I was a founder member of the Irish Freedom Party some 4 years ago and became chairman of that party some 3 years ago. I'm now engaged in running for the European Parliament election for Ireland South. That's what's taking up my time at the moment, and I have to say, getting a very good reaction to it. I think the Irish people are finally waking up to what is going on. And I live in the west of Ireland, in County Clare, quite close to Shannon Airport. I live about 25 miles west of that, over towards the Burren area. If your listeners may have heard of that, it's a very scenic area, quite close to the Atlantic Ocean. Idyllic in many ways, but nobody is immune from what our left-wing governments are doing to us, and there's no hiding place from them. So you have to. This is a fight we have to engage in, or they will destroy us. So I come to that conclusion.
Now, I had. Sorry, I was just going to say. I had the great pleasure of meeting you when I went to Ireland a couple of months ago, and you and your lovely wife, Brona, your son made me very welcome. Your hospitality was second to none, and I very much enjoyed your company. You're very, very good to me over there. We went on street campaigns in Limerick. We handed out leaflets. We saw some of the woke blue-haired, purple-haired brigade out there screaming obscenities, which actually worked in your favour because it created such a fuss that all the crowds came to see. There was like, what was it? Three of them, three maniacs, far left maniacs. And what actually happened was people came and they saw these maniacs spouting their hatred and their vitriol, which was really anti-Irish, and they were disgusted at what they were doing and saying. So actually, that was a win for you that day when you were speaking from the platform.
It was indeed. I mean, the number of people come up to me and said, "Well, I didn't know about you, but I'll certainly vote for you now after seeing the people that are against you." So I went up and thanked them at the end, and of course they resented that enormously.
So, my burning question, Michael, is how is James the cat?
James the cat is very well, but I'm afraid I was fighting a rearguard action with all my advisors, and he's recently had to snip.
Oh no!
Terrible thing.
For anybody,
but
anybody's wondering who James,
it doesn't seem to have affected him psychologically or spiritually, as far as I can determine. He's still a lively cat, still does his hunting, and he seems to be very happy. So, of course, you have a certain affinity with cats, don't you, Jim? He immediately, I mean, cats can be very remote, and it's hard to strike a relationship with a cat, unlike we've always had dogs. But as soon as you came into the room, James was over to snuggle up to you, and whatever it is, you definitely attract them, and they're attracted to you, or they're trusted.
If only cats could vote, Michael, I'd be prime minister. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I remember you and your wife there being amazed because James isn't the kind of cat that just goes and sees anybody. And you told me that he was straight over. He actually came and as I was standing there in the kitchen, the dining room, he came and he just lay on my foot. And I was explaining to you and your wife that this is something that happens to me all the time. For whatever reason, cats love me. Wherever I go, cats come and say hello to me. So it's very peculiar.
I wish we could understand. I wish we could understand the mechanism of that. Why do they do that? Some people not understand. We don't understand. There's so much of nature and of life that we actually just don't understand. And
it's true.
Yeah, okay.
It's true. But please pass on my sympathies to James for the snip, and tell him that I will. I look forward to seeing him the next time I'm over.
Okay,
But look, on a more serious note, Ireland is facing massive challenges right now, and you're standing up as an Irish Republican, as an Irish Patriot, and I find it very, very interesting to spend time with you. I mean, I'm a Scottish Highlander, but I do have an Irish connection going way, way back to the Southern Ireland. And you know, I went to, as I say, Limerick. I was in Dublin. I was in a lot of other places. There's quite a lot of people that follow me from Ireland, and when they realised I was coming over, they wanted to come. Some amazing guys from Cork came up and had some lunch with us. Wonderful people, and of course, my good friend Frank. He never left my side. He was there the whole time. Took me around all the interesting, fantastic places. But look, let's talk about the current situation, because we're going to come on to some particular aspects of it. But I think the burning thing in Ireland right now is this massive amount of illegal immigration that is destroying Irish society and impacting you guys in such a terrible way. What's the current situation like just now, Michael?
Oh, it's really is going from bad to worse. We face an absolutely existential crisis in the country at the moment, and everybody is waking up to it. It's not just ordinary working class people who are always the most affected by these things, but traditional, you would call them guardian reader type people who read the Irish Times. They are actually waking up to it now, and I'm receiving calls from them. What can you do about this? Can you organise a march about this? Can we do something? I just received a call this morning from somebody who would not have been of the demographics that I would expect to be voting for me, somebody very well off, leafy suburb type of thing, but no, very, very concerned. Everybody sees it. It is completely out of control. Our government have no idea of what's happening. They have no idea of the numbers. They have no idea how to control the numbers. They have no idea how to vet people. You are seeing, you know, I pick one particular nationality, Somalia, which is a safe country. There's no war going on there at the moment. We have huge numbers of them coming in. It is a former war zone. Some of the most violent people in the world. They are showing videos of themselves with assault rifles. They're taking over the drugs trade. And you can imagine why, and they're absolutely living off the social welfare system and milk it for everything that it's worth. Some of them, they don't live in Ireland, they go back, carry out their drugs trade somewhere else, come back to Ireland, they have property here, they bring their relatives over, they bring their gang members over. That's what's happening. That's what our government is doing to the country at the moment, because they are completely, the thing is completely out of control. And whenever now the government are finally catching on to it. They're finally, there's an election coming, so they're beginning to take very, very minor steps, which will not be very effective. They're, for example, cutting the benefits that were paid to Ukrainian people. Ukrainian people would come here, they'd get free accommodation, and they get a substantial dole payment of 230 euros per person per week, despite the fact, and free education, free healthcare, the whole gamut that Irish people don't get, you know. And that is absolutely driving people mad. You go into any post office in any small town in the country on a Thursday, and there's a few of Ukrainians each getting 230 bucks and going back to their provided accommodation. It's absolutely disgusting what's happened. It's a complete attack against justice. It's a complete attack against the stability of society. It is wrong in every possible sense you can imagine. It makes no sense whatsoever to be doing this to the country. The government had a program which they instituted in 2016 called Ireland 2040, whereby they wanted to increase the population of the island of Ireland to 8 million from its current, which is about 6 million. And of course, this at a time when the birth rates are dramatically falling. They're certainly on target to meet that or probably surpass it. Ireland now has the highest proportion of people born outside the country of any European country. We have a 10-to-1 proportion of illegal immigrants in the country. We have 10 times the European average. It's an extraordinary figure. It is completely and totally out of control. It represents the most serious existential crisis and threat that the state has faced since its formation, I would say. And that's not...
I was going to come back to something because this is really serious. I mean, it looks like Ireland is being specifically. I mean, it's bad in the UK, it's bad in
Yeah,
England, it's
yeah,
bad in
yeah.
Wales, it's bad in Scotland, it's bad in the United Kingdom. But in
Mm.
Ireland, you have seen really things that I would describe as being off the scale or off the
Yeah,
charts. Now,
totally
you
so.
say that the Irish government they don't know how to stop it, or they don't understand what's going on. I take a slightly different view because I think they know exactly how to stop it. And I think they just don't want to because, in my opinion, I'm going to get your opinion on this. In my opinion, these are globalists that have infiltrated the Irish government that are working for the globalist agenda, Michael.
Yeah, yeah,
In
yeah.
my opinion, the likes of Richie Sunak here in the UK,
Mhm.
it's not that he's stupid. I've heard people say, oh, how could he be so stupid? Why can't he stop the boats? He could stop the boats tomorrow,
Yeah,
but he doesn't
yeah,
want to because he
yeah.
serves Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and his globalist masters, as do your politicians in the Irish government, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, our former Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, who resigned in very strange circumstances just a few weeks ago, he was a former WEF leader, youth leader in his day. I think at the highest level of government, yes, I think there are people there who are taking their orders from outside. They have no loyalty to the Irish nation, absolutely no loyalty to the Irish people. They see Ireland as being a piece of land, a sandbank, and they can put whoever they want on it. They serve their masters from abroad. They actually dislike the Irish people at a racist level. They dislike the Irish people. There are actually racist people, you know.
Mhm.
They dislike Irish culture. They dislike Irish history. They continually tell us we should be ashamed of our past. This is, you know, it's a demoralization process, which is
Yeah.
spectacularly ugly and almost unbelievable when you come across it, but it's there in your face all the time. You're probably right. Yeah, I'd say at the highest level, the people who are at the top or who are allowed to get to the top are sinister people. But the great majority of the people who form the government, the backbenchers, the voters, they are realizing, look, there's something seriously wrong because they're getting it from the people morning, noon, and night. When I go around at the canvas, that is the number one issue that is always raised. And it's the top item on my leaflet. We will end mass migration. Now, the government makes all kinds of lame excuses for why they can't do it. They talk about our international obligations as if we were not a sovereign nation. For example, they talk about the asylum protocol. The asylum protocol dates back to 1951. Now, it does require, if somebody shows up at your border without documentation and seeks asylum, you're obliged to take them in. But it was written at a time before cheap travel. It was written at a time when you wouldn't expect large numbers of people unless it was an adjacent border and there was a war. In any event, we can leave the asylum protocol anytime we want. We're a sovereign nation. It's nothing to do with the European Union. It's like this concept of international law. It's a bit of a chimera, isn't it? You know, I mean, the larger countries ignore international law when it suits them, and the smaller countries are always expected to obey it as if they didn't have their own parliaments and they didn't have their own sovereignty. You don't lose sovereignty once you sign a treaty. If you sign a treaty 70 years ago, it's no longer fit for purpose. It's time to get out, and that's one of the things we should be doing. Now, one of the senior politicians here, former Minister for Justice, has finally come to this conclusion. We've been saying it for years. It's time to opt out of the international asylum protocol. That doesn't mean that we ignore genuine refugees, but we make the decisions and we control the decisions. At the moment, we don't control the decisions, and that's the way the government like it. The international protection regime, whereby we took in 100,000 Ukrainian, so-called Ukrainian, so-called refugees. Many of them are not Ukrainian. They fetch into Ireland without passports, claiming to be Ukrainian. They can't speak Ukrainian. They certainly don't look like Ukrainian.
Right.
But nevertheless, under this international protection regime, we take them in. Now, that's the European Union agreement. But Ireland rejected the Lisbon Treaty first time out, and we negotiated a deal whereby we would not be party to the migration protocols of the European Union. But our governments decided to opt into this one. They don't need to. They can opt out whenever they want. Again, they could do this if they wanted, but they don't. They talk about international agreements. They talk about European solidarity. European solidarity only works in one direction. It works in the direction that where a small state is demanded to do something, they're required to jump. The big states completely ignore that level of solidarity. The Francis, the Germans, they're not interested in European solidarity. They drag Europe what way they want. And I think that's one of the reasons Britain left. Even though you were a powerful voice in Europe, you were really very tired of and Europe
Oh,
because
yeah.
effectively,
Well,
effectively controlled by Germany.
I mean, you're right. And one of the reasons I got involved, I mean, I was a parliamentary candidate with the Conservatives back in the 2010 election when David Cameron was standing for election. He's a nice guy, but oh my goodness, he's very, very soft and weak on Europe. And it was one of the reasons I didn't stay. They wanted me to stay, but I'm sorry, but their values didn't align with mine. When Nigel Farage came along, I'd always admired him and what he said. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but I mean, he did run circles around the Europhiles in the EU Parliament when he was a member of the Parliament there.
Yes.
When he launched the Brexit Party, it was a no-brainer. I went down to see what it was all about. Ended up getting introduced to some people. I ended up being on stage with Nigel, actually, and then ended up joining and becoming very deeply involved and fought for British independence from the EU. But I'm a Scottish Highlander. I've always loved Irish people. The Irish people and the Scots have a bit of an affinity. We talked about that when I was spending some time with you, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, we are fellow Celts. We have similar histories, similar sized countries. We have a lot in common.
There's a bit of an argument. Who came first, the Scots or the Irish, Michael? Come on, what do you think?
Well, the Latin word for an Irishman was a Scotus. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. But I'm not sure.
Well, whatever, we have got very similar traditions, similar language, culture. The Irish people are very artistic. They're musical, incredibly musical people, and they make the finest Guinness in the world. But there is something that caught my attention. What on earth happened at the Eurovision Song Contest? And for anybody that's from America watching this, there's a song contest called the Eurovision Song Contest. Countries put entries in. What was that Irish entry all about, Michael? What was that? I couldn't believe it.
It was satanic. I mean, the person who Bambi Thug, who was the singer, nobody knows whether it's a man or a woman, but she looked like it looks like a woman. I put up a poem about it on Twitter asking her to confirm which she was, and I got flamed over it, of course, and the level of abuse you get from the trans society. For asking a simple, personally unpersonal question like, do you have a penis? But so you ask that question, you're in real trouble, and you get flamed. But I put up another video after the thing showing the occult symbolism, a pentagram within a circle. That was a part of the whole thing, a pentagram hung upside down across her neck, calling on the powers of hell. I mean, that's really what it was. That sort of thing does call demons into your world and does bring bad luck to the person and to the country that it represents. So people really have to be aware of this. Our great and our good were talking about the stunning performance and all this nonsense. Thankfully, she or it didn't win. It really was a disturbing thing.
Yes, it was.
But at a certain artistic level, I guess you could say, yes, there was a talent there. But it's a talent directed towards horror, towards ugliness, really, towards evil, a rejection of wholesomeness, a rejection of happiness, a celebration of despair almost, as you would expect from somebody who's gone to the dark side of the occult world. She or it calls the pop brand Ouija pop. The Ouija word is a very, very dangerous thing. A very dangerous thing for people to dabble with. And I would appeal to people, look, put this behind you. Don't get involved in this. This is dangerous tack. And you want to be real careful. But it's an indication of what happens to a culture when there's a loss of a religious sense. I mean, Ireland was, until very recently, at the highest levels of church attendance of any European country, Ireland, the United States. That's all gone now. The youth have completely abandoned church going, they've completely abandoned Christianity. And it's not that, they believe in nothing. They believe in anything. They believe in any pop psychology that comes along. They believe in any occult theme that comes along. They're latching out, they need something, but they have rejected the traditional faith structures. And what they latch onto is very often completely irrational. You could say the woke agenda is a cult, which is beyond rationality. There's no reason or sense or rhyme or reason to it of any kind. And that's where people are stuck. And as a result of that, your cultural symbols become horrible. They become destructive, they become banal, and evil always is banal. There's no beauty in it. There's a rejection of beauty, and that is what you tend to get in pagan culture. But it goes beyond just representations of beauty. It goes into violence, and it goes into human sacrifice, all that kind of very, very harsh penalties in courts for minor infractions of the cult. So if you say something, the hate speech laws are a classic example of that in Ireland. 5 years in prison for possession of something that somebody might consider offensive, and you can be absolutely certain that when that gets going, if you're in possession of a Bible which says certain things about homosexuality, you can be absolutely bloody certain that will be.
Well, I was going to say, I was just going to say, as you were speaking, I was thinking, how long before they ban the Bible? That will be the next thing. I did an article just this morning about the Liberal Democrats, which in the UK, which I've always considered to be quite anti-Christian in their policies and their ideologies. And there was a candidate, I mean, he should have known better, who tried to join the Liberal Democrats as a political candidate. And because he has Christian values, biblical values and biblical beliefs, they said you can't stand. Well, he should have known. I mean, he should have known. But any Christian that votes for the Liberal Democrats in the UK, in my opinion, is like a turkey voting for Christmas. They're not on your side. But this is shocking because Ireland was always traditionally strong faith, weren't they?
It was it was what defined us as a nation almost. The very high Catholic attendance, very high structured religious belief system that kept us sane. The Irish can be a very dramatic people. But the religious belief system kept them on the straight and narrow almost, And I'm afraid when you lose that, you can go down some very, very dark alleyways. But you talk about banning the Bible. When I say to people, look, the hate speech laws will clearly lead to a banning of the Bible. No, that's an exaggeration. That could never happen. But I remember saying a few years ago, are we going to have pride parades in our primary schools? And they laughed uproariously. Well, that's exactly what you have. You have pride flags outside our primary schools for most of the year. You have trans flags. All this nonsense, this horror. And that's one of the purposes of my campaign, actually, that we would protect kids from trans activism in this country. And it happens very quickly. It's not that this is going to happen in 20 years. It happens almost immediately. Once the hate speech laws come in, you can be absolutely. It's almost like the Scottish situation. They brought in the hate speech laws, and now there are 10,000 cases that the police have to wade their way through. Most of them nonsensical, of course, but they will have to be brought through the courts, and you'll get some crank of a judge who will say, this is clearly on the wrong side of the law, and put him in prison and take his computers away. No question about it. An Islamic fundamentalist or a Satanist is going to identify certain sections of the Bible and say, look, this is in breach with the hate speech laws. This advocates says that homosexuality is wrong. Therefore, this has to be confiscated. Anybody and then, unfortunately, the courts will agree, and the message will have to go out. If you have a Bible, you have to extract the following sections and take it out of the Bible, tear them out of your book. Of course, that's going to happen. There's no question about that's what's going to happen. Is that
I was very pleased. I was very pleased, Michael. I mean, I went to church with you. What was the name of that little church again? Was it Father Christie? I can't.
No, it was Dysart O'D, I think it was. No, not Dysart. It was, or was it Ruan? I think it was Dysart. Yeah, Dysart. Yeah, small little church. Yeah.
I mean, we walked in there. We were late. It was strange, wasn't it? We were late, and the place was packed out.
But
there was 2 chairs sitting there, like right there for us when we walked in. It was so strange, wasn't it? It's like they were expecting us, Mike.
There's a call to conversion there or something, Jim.
But it was nice. It was a good service, and I think it was Father Christie. I'm sure it was Father Christie that was doing the service. I can't exactly remember, but it was either Father Christie or Father O'Neill.
O'Neill, Pat O'Neill. Yeah.
I think it was O'Neill. It was Patrick O'Neill, wasn't it? Yeah. It was a very good service. Yeah, and it was packed. It was good to see that in the.
Yeah, it was great. I think there must. I think it was an anniversary mass, and that often brings a big crowd around. But in my little church in Corofin now, you go back 20 years, that would be packed every Sunday for every mass. That's no longer the case. It's mainly an older group to go to it. But I think it's changing. I think that young people are beginning to they're beginning to see the dangers of the woke cult, and they're beginning to figure out themselves, look, this has arisen as a result of the loss of religious faith and religious belief. And I think some of them are beginning to come back to it. And it's always the small creative minorities that direct a society. The majority of people think they're in control, but it's the small creative people who have strong beliefs. They're the ones who direct what happens in the society. And if you have a small creative Christian minority, they will convert. They will convert the society to Christianity again. So it's not all negative. I think the horrors that we're witnessing in Ireland at the moment will have potentially a beneficial result in terms of bringing people back to common sense.
Well,
and
I mean, one of the things that we kind of touched on it when I was with you was what position is the Catholic Church taking in Southern Ireland in relation to what's going on, and maybe they could be taking a slightly more stronger approach. I mean, I don't know, Michael.
I think one of the first items on the agenda in terms of the woke cult was to silence the Catholic Church, because for so long it had been such a powerful and influential cultural player. And that was done through, there were sexual abuse scandals. There's no question about that. And they were pretty dreadful. Certainly not very widespread, but they were there. And that was used to silence the church. The basic lines: how have you any right whatsoever to talk to us about moral issues when your own priests were engaging in sexual abuse of minors? And it was very effective. So the bishops are almost reluctant now to talk certainly on a sexual matter. And they're reluctant to talk on a cultural matter. They're reluctant to deal with. I mean, all of our culture is based around sexuality of some kind, whether it's the trans agenda or the homosexual agenda. It's all sexual, and the bishops are just very, very reluctant to say anything about it because they'll be shouted down.
Well, in my opinion, whether they get shouted down or not, they need to be standing up and showing stronger leadership. Michael,
the bishop and the cardinal wears a red cloak to remind them of martyrdom. And that it is necessary to be a martyr, and it is necessary to take that abuse. You have to take that abuse. So Christ took that abuse, and they must follow in his footsteps. And lay people are doing it,
Yeah.
But the priests and bishops are finding it difficult because they're immediately silenced. Well, who are you to talk, given what you did? And like every priest is held responsible for the action of a very small number of those priests. So that's, of course, grossly unfair. But that never stopped them before.
There's something else I wanted to come on. I had an interview quite recently with another Irish politician, and I had been aware that there were attempts to give illegal migrants, they're there illegally, right? But the Irish government, the globalist infiltrated government in Ireland, wants to give these illegal migrants the powers of police officers to police the Irish nationalists and the people that's in Ireland. Now, there is a growing evidence of this. And by the way, I just found out that this is now happening in Germany. I know it's happening in Canada because I've spoken to a lot of people over there. It's happening. This must simply be one of their globalist agendas to give migrants power over the domestic native populations. Now, it gets worse because I got told, and I was shocked to hear this, that illegal migrants in Ireland, they just need to prove they've been living there for 6 months, could be in a tent, and they can not just vote in the elections, but they can stand to be elected.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
It is just local elections. They can't vote in a parliamentary election, but they can vote in a local council election. And they can be politically active. And councillors can be quite influential. Yeah, the whole thing about, the giving police powers to people, two things. One, they're from a different culture. They're alienated from the people. They will have no mercy in terms of policing them and using brutality, which increasingly we're seeing our police force becoming involved in. They will have no sympathy with the local people. I was in the airport there some weeks ago, and just you can recognize a military-trained person when you see them. They have a certain jib about them. They have a certain haircut. They have a certain way of holding themselves. They have a certain fitness. And the number of men I saw, look, he's obviously ex-military. Just a huge number. It just stands out. What are all these soldiers doing here? And they look like soldiers. Are they being brought in to suppress and eliminate the people? it sounds far-fetched, but when you look at what the government has done, it makes no sense. Is this the next plan? The idea of recruiting people who have no empathy or no sympathy with the culture into the police force is shocking. Many of the guards, as we call our police here, they are leaving the force. They're disgusted with what's happening. The present Garda Commissioner is rumoured to have been a former operative of MI5 in Britain. He has no confidence. There was a vote of no confidence in him by his own members. The vote against him was something like 98.7%. That's completely unprecedented. The guys have never held a vote of no confidence in their commissioner before.
So let me just clarify. So the current head of the Irish police is rumoured to be ex-MI5, is that right?
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Rumoured, of course.
Do you know if there's any evidence of that, or is it just...
Look, I don't have the facts here before me, Jim. But many people say this. He was in the RUC, the Royal Ulster Constabulary in Ulster, in Northern Ireland, and that was a pretty bloody corrupt police force. Let's be honest about it.
Which is another area of content or contentious issue, because there seems to be some cross-border policing going on. I've heard that there are police officers. I mean, they're not RUC now, Royal Ulster Constabulary, for anybody that didn't know, but they had a reputation back in the day. But there is Northern Irish police who take an oath to the monarch in Britain. In other words, because it's Northern Ireland, which is considered part of the UK, they take their oath, which is now to the King, to King Charles. Now, the fact that they're going down to police Southern Irish that are not part of the United Kingdom is pretty contentious, isn't it?
It is, of course, yeah. It's good. And a lot of even quite senior officers have been recruited into the Guards. Now, I'm not sure. Yes, they have an oath. Presumably, they're released from their oath once they leave the police service in Northern Ireland. But it is a notable feature now that a number of quite senior officers have been brought in from Northern Ireland. Strange. You just wonder what's going on, and you really would wonder why they brought Drew Harris down from Northern Ireland to be the commissioner of the Guards in the south.
Now, Michael, when we are talking about all these, I had a very good friend of the channel. His name's John O'Looney. He was on for, as I guess, a few days ago. And he talked about the fact that he has been getting evidence. He's now got evidence, a massive amount of evidence, that the whole migration thing is a bit of a scam. Not only a scam, but it's worse than that, because all these illegal migrants that are coming in, as you talk about, you can spot them. They've got a military bearing. And these are young men. They're not women. They're not children. It's all young men that's pouring into Ireland as well.
Yeah.
He is saying that he's got evidence that these are UN-backed soldiers and that they're going to be deployed on the streets of Ireland, on the streets of the UK when the next pandemic lockdown is announced. And there is fears that they're going to send British forces out of the UK to the meat grinder in Ukraine to get them out of the way. They will then confiscate the mobile phones. They will stop them from hearing news of what's going on back home. And these migrants are going to be issued with uniforms, and they're going to police the Irish in the south, and they're going to police the Brits and the English in Great Britain, and tell them where they can go, what they can do, and they'll have the powers of arrest. What do you make of that?
It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. As I said, I've been reading about this stuff for the past 30 years. G. Edward Griffin, these guys who predicted an awful lot of this, the globalist agenda coming and how people would be suppressed and demoralized. But I wouldn't have believed it would be possible within my lifetime. But things are happening so rapidly. None of it makes any sense. Why is it all young men who are coming in? Why is it all young men of military age who are coming in? Could that really happen? When you mentioned about exporting British troops to the meat grinder of Ukraine, yes, that begins to make a bit of sense, and bring these people into for policing and for military suppression within the United Kingdom. The complete psychological pressure that was brought to bear on people during the COVID crisis over what turned out to be actually quite a minor issue. When you see how the population was manipulated by propaganda at that time. Yes, you could. I think the scenario you paint, I've no way of knowing whether it's true or not, but it is plausible. Is the government just out of control, or is there some plan behind it? I don't know. You find it very difficult to prove. What you said is quite plausible. What you said could well happen. It's horrific if it's true. It's utterly frightening and terrifying. It's the end of our nation and the end of our people. And when you get military foreigners fleeing your country, they're going to be brutal and they're going to be merciless. And they will be trained to be that. And they, of course, they will be filled with resentment that this is your country now. You have to take property from these people. You have to kick these people out. You were an oppressed minority, whatever nonsense they talk. People in Ireland have gone from being a stable, democratic society only a few years ago. This has all happened really in the last 4 to 5 years. You can almost say it kicked off when COVID came in.
Well, there's a lot of people that think that was actually what was really behind it. Now, what we're discussing about these UN troops coming in, this is not just confined to Ireland. It's happening in the UK. It's happening in England. It's happening in Wales. It's happening in Scotland. It's also happening in other nations. For example, the American southern border. There is millions of people coming through that border, but it's happening in Australia. It's happening in New Zealand. It's happening in Canada. And it's happening in other nations in Europe. There is a coordinated effort. And a lot of the people that seem to be arriving in Ireland with these illegal migrants have handlers. And they are smoothing the way for them to come in. And when you hear of them getting elected or standing in the local elections to become councillors, they are effectively taking over Irish society. And the true Irish people are going to find themselves in a minority very quickly. I mean, you touched on that. Yeah. And the other thing you touched on was the fact that this could very well be the case because, if you've got like the squaddies, the British soldiers would not turn on. I don't believe that some of them might, but a lot of them would say, no way am I going to start taking people out for forced vaccinations at the point of a gun. To their mums and their dads and their sisters and their brothers and their kids, and their parents. That's not going to happen. So they're going to get them packed out, away to Ukraine, out the way, and the Britain will be at the mercy of the globalist migrant army, and Ireland's going to be the same.
It's a frightening prospect, Jim. There's no question about it. I hope and pray to God it doesn't happen. I think people are waking up to it. But it sort of is the only thing that makes sense. If trying to make sense of what they're doing, you can't. So you sort of conclude, are they incompetent? But it's like the CIA. It's that you often think the CIA are completely incompetent, but they actually make mistakes deliberately. And I think maybe it's the same with the ultimate leadership in our government, that the mistakes are not mistakes; they're deliberate efforts.
Let's go back to the elections, Michael, because you're standing as a European candidate, and you are leading the way, and you're getting a fantastic response as a founder and the chairman of the Irish Freedom Party. And as I say, your policies are very much aligned with a lot of the people, believe it or not, in the UK who would consider themselves either English patriots or Scottish patriots or Welsh patriots or British patriots. Funny old world we live in, isn't it? I want to ask you, though, about Sinn Fein, because there's a lot of people in the States that think Sinn Fein who were, please do correct me if I get any of this wrong, because I'm not an Irish citizen and I might not understand things perfectly, but Sinn Fein were certainly considered to be the political arm of the IRA. The IRA was the Irish Republican Army that kind of came after Michael Collins and the 1916 uprising took place. And wow, that's going back in history a little bit, but they were considered to be Irish patriots and Irish nationalists, but they're not anymore, are they?
No, absolutely not. Sinn Fein, they got to the present position they are in the polls, which is, they're actually polling as one of the largest parties in the country by waving the Irish flag and by persistently repeating the nationalist mantra and raising substantial amounts of money from the United States. They're the only party in the country which is allowed to raise money abroad, which is under the Good Friday Agreement. Bit of a mistake there, but they managed to get that through, which puts them in a very powerful position. But they're no longer a nationalist party; they're a globalist party. They're absolutely on side with the European Union. They're the bank. They're now the party of the international bankers. They never wave the Irish flag anymore. They always wave the Palestinian flag. If you go to a Sinn Fein rally, the Palestinian flag is everywhere. They're almost ashamed of the Irish flag, and they condemn what they call the far right. for waving the Irish flag and say we've no right to do so, but at least we will wave it. They will not. They're ashamed of it. They're ashamed of their nationality and they're ashamed of their country. So they are very much a part of that globalist agenda, unfortunately. And they're beginning to suffer from it. There was a rally in Dublin that weekend before last, maybe 10,000 people at it, all having tricolours draped around them. They would typically have been, go back a few years, they would all have been Sinn Fein voters. And their chant was, Sinn Fein are traitors, Sinn Fein are traitors. So they're definitely losing support from that key working class demographic that would have been their main demographic, a nationalist working class demographic. They've lost that vote. I'm getting calls from the United States asking me what's going on, people trying to set up support group for our party. And who would have been, the Irish American diaspora would have supported Sinn Féin as the nationalist party. Sinn Féin are not the nationalist party. They're a Marxist, globalist, internationalist party. And that is becoming increasingly obvious. The leadership of Sinn Féin is woke central. Think Nancy Pelosi on wheels. That's what the leadership of Sinn Féin is. Completely female, of course. Men don't get a look in. It's a completely woke party.
Do you know the funny thing is? Do you know the funny thing is, Michael? Everything that you've said about Sinn Féin and what they really are could be applied to the Scottish National Party and the fake independence nationalists in Scotland, because they want to be governed by the globalists in the EU as well. They're fake nationalists. They're just as bad as Sinn Féin. And anybody that votes Scottish National Party is voting for globalism. Of that, there's no doubt. I see huge similarities between them and Sinn Féin.
Yeah, very similar. And Nicola Sturgeon was very much a hero figure for the Irish establishment here. Pretty dreadful, but they will run non-national candidates. They make a point of having as many black faces as they can on their posters, and they don't seem to be aware of the huge existential crisis that Ireland faces, and they're not interested in that. So they've used that to get into a position of power, and now they're going to abandon it. Very cynical.
When I was sitting in your living room, it was after we'd been out for, we had a wonderful dinner. I've got to say, once again, you've got your wife is an excellent cook. I pay tribute to her. Sitting there on the couch, curled up with James the cat, and you put a film on for me, and it was about Michael Collins. And what was the name of that film again, Michael?
Just Michael Collins was the name of the film.
Michael Collins. I thought it was. I couldn't quite remember.
It's about 20 years old. Very good film. Yeah.
Great film. And it was, the opening scene was where we were on that rally, that march, wasn't it? When we went out with the Irish Patriots, the Garden of Remembrance.
Yes. That's
where it all kicked off.
Yeah.
But I was with Herman Kelly, is he the president? Is he president of Irish?
I'm the chairman of the party,
I mean, that's where it all happened back in 1916, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Well, the Garden of Remembrance is a memorial garden for 1916. It happened just slightly down from that in O'Connell Street, General Post Office. That was the central headquarters of the rebels in 1916.
But that's where we stood on those steps, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was indeed. Yeah.
And I was very grateful to Herman, because I didn't know he was going to do it, but he actually asked me to say a few words, along with a lot of the other political candidates. I mean, I'm not an Irish political candidate. Maybe I should go and camp in Ireland for 6 months and run for local election. I'd probably probably wouldn't. I was going to say, but what I remember speaking there, and I felt chills. And I'm not an Irish citizen, but I know its history very, very, very well. And my goodness, there was on that event, there was about 10,000 Irish Patriots there. My goodness, and what a warm welcome I got. But I know the other march that took place more recently, I've actually heard there was more people at that particular march. So it looks like you guys are getting the word out.
Yeah, we are getting the word out. And of course, the newspapers, RT, will talk, if they cover it at all, there's a few hundred people. They always exaggerate by a factor of 10. If they say there's 150 people, that means there's 1,500. And certainly there was a rally I was at, I'd say 2 years ago, and I'd say I would be reasonably good at estimating numbers. I say I didn't speak to maybe 30,000 people in there. The newspapers at 1,500. It's just it's always a factor of 10 or perhaps 20 if they're really pushed. And they always, and in the if there's an LGBT march, they'll show a close up of 5 or 6 people and say there was 2,000 people at. That means there was maybe 150. That's what they do all the time, and it's so blatant and so obvious that everybody sees through it now. I've been out on the canvas, and one of the things that people immediately raise the issue of immigration. Maybe what can you do about it? And one of they said to me, well, we haven't heard of you before. And I said, well, that RT will never mention us. And I said, well, and they immediately understand, RT can't be trusted. The RT is our television station, our national television station. They cannot be trusted to tell the truth. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that the papers lie. Everybody knows that they're effectively propaganda organizations. And they cannot be trusted to tell the truth. They will not have me anywhere near a debate during this election.
No. They're infiltrated by the globalists. They're bought and paid for. We know that. We can see that. One thing that I'm gonna ask you just before we sort of maybe think we're sort of going to look at bringing it to close in the next 5-6 minutes. But there is a lot of people. I mean, I do a lot of reporting on Ireland, as you know, because I love the Irish people. I think they're a magnificent people, and we're historically we're closely aligned, as you know. We're all Celtic nations. Wales, of course, is as well. A lot of people have said, "Where's the IRA?" And I know that you don't speak for them, and I know you're never involved. But a lot of people have said the IRA fought. The IRA formed after Michael Collins and Dan Breen and all these guys got together, and they became national heroes for the Republican side, and they fought against British rule. Now you can argue for or against, just depending on point of view. But the point is this: they fought to get the Brits out. We're witnessing the destruction of Ireland, not just in the south, but in the north as well. Where's the IRA? Where's the fight?
The IRA have gone the same direction as Sinn Fein. They've been infiltrated and taken over by globalists and Marxists. That happened around the 60s. I mean, one of the problems with Irish republicanism is it tends to split. After David Eyre was also one of the IRA leaders at the very early stages. He became a constitutional parliamentarian where there was this faction that wanted to maintain a militant. They didn't agree with partition of the country, and they wanted to maintain a militant presence to fight against partition. And it just became more and more extreme and more isolated. And the IRA were very small. They were just down to maybe less than 100 people in the 1960s when the trouble broke out in the north. And that gave them a new lease of life. But they were infiltrated by very hardline leftist protagonists who were more interested in international Marxism than they were in Irish nationalism. Now, they did use Irish nationalism as well, but they exploited it in the same way that Sinn Féin have exploited it. They're not genuine nationalists. They're a terrorist organization. You could call them something like a Marxist terrorist organization at this time. The problem with a militant or military wing is that they're impossible to control. They're a law unto themselves. They're dangerous, and unless they're answerable to a democratically elected or representative group of people, they are very dangerous. I speak to a lot of people who are so completely frustrated with what's happening in this country that they ask me, should we start becoming violent? I always say no. I have no interest in that because it goes out of control. And it can be it can be controlled by a very small number of thuggish people. And once they have that power that springs from the barrel of a gun, you don't know what way they're going to use it. And you've no reason whatsoever to believe that they would use it for good purposes or for nationalist purposes. And that's the danger,
It's often the case. It's often the case that when you start to go down that route, as you quite correctly said, things can get out of control
very easily. And you're talking with people who maybe control a little army faction, and they suddenly realize they have enormous power, which they would never be given by the people, and they will exploit that power. So you have to be real careful when you start talking about militant resistance. I could never support that.
But what we can support is mass non-compliance. We do not comply, as Donald Trump has just said, in the United States of America, because he's fearful. He's not fearful. He's calling it out, though. He's saying he thinks that the elections may not be free and fair, that the globalists are going to use H5N1 and another pandemic to thwart the elections. I think he might be right. But let's hope that is it June the 6th or June the 7th that you're...
June the 7th, Friday, 3 weeks Friday.
As I always do on this channel, Michael, I give our great guests the last and final word. And I'm going to do the same, going to give you the same courtesy. So for the next 2 or 3 minutes, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Thank you for having me on. Look, I'm just saying to the Irish people, we are facing a really, really serious existential crisis in our country. Immigration is only one part of it. Immigration is, to some extent, a symptom of what this leftward drift has done to our society. And it's no longer a simple leftward drift. This is a hard left drift. This is a social and cultural and economic cult. which is completely intolerant, which is to destroy you as an individual with civil and religious liberties. They want to wipe that out. They want to take your property from you. And they're well on the way. And I don't think anybody, if I said that 5 years ago, people wouldn't have believed me. I think people are now coming to the realization when they see what's happening to their capital city, the way in the space of a couple of years it has been transformed and turned into, what I won't use the term, utterly dreadful place to visit, a dangerous place to visit. When they see the violent people who are taking over the drug business in our country, who are imported by the government, when they see elderly Irish women being battened by the riot squad because they're protesting about their community being taken over by unvetted illegal immigrants into the country, when they see the government participating effectively in lawbreaking and being backed up by the courts, they begin to wonder what has happened to our society. This is no longer a society based on the rule of law. It is no longer a society where the government represents the people. And that's a large part of the problem with the European Union. Governments take their orders from outside. They take their orders from the European Commission, which is not elected by anybody and has no intention of answering to the people. It makes dreadful decisions such as van der Leyen is making in regard to winding up and banging the drums of war in respect to this Ukrainian war. She will never have to answer to the people. European citizens are going to be sent out there, as you put it, into the meat grinder of Ukraine, and the person responsible will never have to answer to the people. That's largely one of the reasons why the Irish government why our democracy has degenerated, because of our effective association with international bodies, mainly the European Union, which does not govern in the interests of any of the people of Europe, certainly not in the interests of the people of Ireland. Ukrainian war is being run for the benefit of American corporations and European corporations. It's not being run for the benefit of the people of Ukraine. That matter could have been resolved. Ireland is a neutral country and could have had a major role to play in the resolution of an international conflict such as Ukraine if we had been able to present ourselves as honest brokers between the parties. That's the value of a neutral nation. But we're not taking that role. We're banging the drums of war along with our European so-called partners, who are not our partners at all. We're certainly not equal partners with them. So, but I do think people are waking up. People are seeing the absolute horror of what has happened in this country over the past few years, and exemplified by our Eurovision entry. That's a cipher for what's happened in the whole country, and they are alarmed. They are really alarmed. They're really worried. And I think the response I'm getting as I go around is people who, at last, somebody is trying to represent the interests of the country. At last, we have a viable alternative to vote for. I do think the major parties are going to be slaughtered in this election. Now, people are prepared to do that in a European election because they kind of think it's a little bit distant, and I think maybe it's not that important. Whether that translates to a slaughtering in the general election, I don't know. That remains to be seen. But I do think they're going to be slaughtered in this election. At least I hope so, and I hope that results in our candidates getting elected. We would be an effective voice for Ireland in the European Parliament. And there are many, this is not just an Irish phenomenon, it's happening throughout Europe. There are Eurosceptic parties emerging in Germany, in Italy, in France. We know that. They're the biggest parties actually in those countries. But I think the European Parliament is going to have a very, very different hue once this election is over. It's almost a place where you can imagine Nigel Farage being comfortable, because he would have had a lot of friends from the other side. Now, what that means for the long term in Europe, I don't know. My own opinion is that when it became a union, when it called itself the European Union and developed a separate legal personality, it had gone too far. I believe that the union as such should be abolished, and should be that the nations that are there can come together again in a trading arrangement and an arrangement of mutual cooperation without the high-handed bureaucratic control that exists in the union. And I think if that had happened, Britain would have been happy to stay in. But this idea of the union controlling your politics, controlling your immigration policy, that's wrong. We didn't join that. We joined a trading arrangement, and that's what Britain joined. But it morphed into this highly centralized, bureaucratic, authoritarian state, which is what we have now. And I believe that has to change. I believe if it doesn't change, it will collapse.
Well, I think there's a lot of people think you're right. And of course, we don't have an issue with the European Parliament as such, but they're the only parliament of lawmakers in the world that cannot pass any laws unless the unelected bureaucrats in the European Commission agree. And that's always been the situation. Michael, we're running out of time. I'm getting my producer's shouting at me saying, Jim, we've got to go to the next one. Okay, so all right, look, can I just say, a huge thank you to you, Michael. It's been a pleasure and honor to have you on the show, and I wish you every success in the forthcoming election. It'd be really nice to have you here. Thank you. Will you come back on again?
I will, absolutely. And thank you very much for having me on, Jim. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. It's been a great conversation. I'm a great admirer of what you're doing, and I know you're putting a lot of your time out there, a lot of yourself out there, and I want to thank you as well for what you're doing. So thanks very much.
I'm heading to several European nations in due course.
Good.
You'll hear and see all about that in due course. But I'm hoping to get back to Ireland, and of course I would never come to Ireland and not stop and say hello to you and your wonderful family, and your wife and your son, and of course not forgetting James the cat. I'm looking forward to seeing him too.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
You know, thanks, Michael. So for all the people that are watching this out there, you know, I don't care whether you're an Irish patriot or an English patriot or a Scottish or a Welsh patriot or a Canadian patriot or an American patriot. One thing's very clear. Old rivalries and old differences need to be put aside. We have a common enemy, and that common enemy are the globalists. Wherever you are, if you love your country and you're a nationalist and you believe in freedom, you should be supporting every Irish person that feels the same, wherever you are in the world. But as I always like to say, you guys are the real stars of this show, and I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you for sharing and liking this content. It really does help our guests. And once again, Michael, my pleasure to have you on with me. I look forward to actually seeing you again in the not too distant
very good. Hopefully it won't be too far in the future. Okay, thanks very much. And
indeed.
nice.
This is Jim Ferguson. All the best. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.